Have you ever grown tomatoes in your backyard garden? If you have, think back for a moment. How much harvest does one tomato plant usually give you? 5 pounds? 10 pounds? Or maybe, if you are lucky, 15 to 20 pounds for the entire season. And perhaps you think, that's already pretty good. It's just a backyard tomato plant anyway. It doesn't need to produce that much. But now, let me take you to a very different kind of garden. The garden of the Amish people. There, it is still the same tomato plant. But when grown using their unique method, a single plant can produce up to 100 pounds of tomatoes before the cold season arrives. And immediately, a question appears in your mind. Why is there such a huge difference? It is still the same tomato plant, still grown in a backyard garden, still receiving sunlight, water, and soil. But one plant only produces a few dozen fruits before slowing down, while the other keeps flowering, keeps feeding fruit, keeps producing continuously until the cold weather finally forces it to stop. So what did the Amish do differently? The answer may lie in one very small step that many people usually rush through from the very first planting day. In this video, I will take you inside the Amish method of growing tomatoes, and you will discover that the real secret is not in the top of the plant, but in the thing silently working underground, the root system. What the Amish understand about tomato plants that many people overlook. To understand why a tomato plant can come close to producing 100 pounds of fruit, you first need to understand one thing. The Amish do not force tomato plants to live like decorative plants standing neatly inside a cage. They see the plant according to its true biological nature, a species capable of expanding an extremely powerful root system when the stem comes into contact with moist soil. In nature, wild tomatoes do not simply grow straight upward. They tend to sprawl sideways and spread outward, and any part of the stem touching the ground can grow additional roots on its own. Tomato stems are covered with many tiny hairs. These are not just protective hairs, but places where adventitious roots can form when buried in soil. So instead of digging a shallow hole only about 4 to 6 inches deep and placing the root ball directly into it, experienced growers often plant much deeper or lay the stem horizontally inside a long trench. When 12 to 18 inches of stem are placed in moist soil, new roots can begin forming along the buried stem nodes in just about 7 to 14 days. At that point, the plant is no longer depending on one small root ball near the soil surface. Instead, it develops a wider root mat capable of absorbing more water, taking up more minerals, and keeping the plant stable during extreme summer heat. This is the foundational difference. A shallow-rooted plant becomes extremely vulnerable when the top layer of soil heats up, dries out quickly, and then suddenly becomes soaked again after watering. Those repeated swings create stress inside the plant, reducing stable calcium uptake and making fruits more likely to crack or develop blossom end rot. And when that happens, many people assume they simply need stronger fertilizer, while the real problem may have started on the very first planting day. The root system was never given enough space to become the engine of the entire plant. The mistakes that are limiting tomato plants. Interestingly, most tomato plants do not fail because of a lack of fertilizer or sunlight. They usually stop producing early because of invisible limitations created by the grower without realizing it. And when you closely observe how the Amish garden, you will notice that they spend a great deal of time avoiding exactly these 3 problems. 1. Roots that are too shallow. Many backyard tomato plants are grown in holes only about 4 to 6 inches deep, just enough to fit the root ball. The problem is that this upper soil layer heats up extremely fast during midsummer, especially when outdoor temperatures rise above 85 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. As a result, the root zone constantly overheats, dries out, and then gets drenched again after watering, creating a repeating cycle of stress. Meanwhile, when the tomato stem is buried about 12 to 18 inches deep, the plant can produce many additional secondary roots along the buried stem in just 1 to 2 weeks. A larger root system allows the plant to access deeper, more stable moisture during prolonged heat waves. 2. The nitrogen trap. This is why many tomato plants look incredibly green and vigorous, but still produce disappointing harvests. Too much nitrogen causes the plant to continuously prioritize producing new leaves and stems. You may see a tomato bush with dark green foliage growing aggressively, yet the amount of flowers and fruit remains surprisingly low. During the fruiting stage, tomato plants need a more balanced nutritional system. Phosphorus supports flowering, potassium helps transport sugars into the fruit, and calcium is connected to cell wall stability and fruit quality. If nitrogen levels remain excessively high for too long, the plant will continue investing in foliage instead of shifting into heavy fruit production mode. Finally, forcing the plant into a single stem. Many people love tomato plants that look perfectly clean, upright, and heavily pruned. But in reality, removing every sucker is often not the best strategy for maximum production. The Amish often keep one main stem along with 1 to 2 strong secondary leaders. This gives the plant additional photosynthetic area and more flowering clusters while still maintaining enough airflow to reduce leaf disease. Their goal is to create a strong enough structure to continuously support fruit production throughout the entire summer season. And this is where we begin to see the real difference. The Amish build tomato productivity on a few very simple pillars, beginning from the moment the plant first goes into the ground. The first pillar: deep trench planting. After understanding that tomato plants need a large root system to support large yields, the first step in the Amish-style system is changing the way the plant is placed into the ground. Instead of digging a small round hole and planting the tomato upright, they often use a technique called deep trench planting. With seedlings around 10 to 18 inches tall, especially leggy ones, you can remove the leaves along the lower stem, leaving only about 2 to 3 healthy leaf clusters near the top. Then dig a trench about 6 to 8 inches deep, long enough to lay the stripped stem horizontally underground. The top of the plant is gently bent upward so that about 3 to 5 inches remain above the soil surface. Once the trench is covered, the entire buried stem section comes into contact with moist soil. The important detail is not burying the leaves, because buried leaves rot easily and can create conditions for fungal disease. Only the bare stem should be underground. Within about 7 to 14 days, new roots begin forming along multiple points of the buried stem. As a result, the plant no longer depends only on the original root ball. Instead, it develops a longer, wider root zone located deeper inside cooler and more stable soil layers. By midsummer, when intense heat dries out the surface soil extremely fast, this expanded root system helps the plant tolerate stress better, absorb water more consistently, and continue supporting fruit production longer. The second pillar: thick mulch. After helping the tomato plant build a larger root system through deep trench planting, the next thing the Amish do is protect that root zone. 1. Never leaving bare soil under the summer sun. If you walk through many Amish gardens during the hottest part of summer, you will notice one very clear thing. Around the base of tomato plants, there is almost never bare exposed soil. Instead, they usually cover the ground with straw, shredded dry leaves, old hay, or other types of organic mulch around the base of the plant. This mulch layer is not there just to make the garden look neat. It is performing multiple important jobs at the same time. First, it keeps the soil cooler. In midsummer, bare soil can heat up extremely fast. When the root zone gets baked under direct sunlight, the plant absorbs water less efficiently. Soil microorganisms become less active, and the entire plant enters a stressed condition even if you continue watering regularly. But with a thick mulch layer, the soil surface is almost like being protected by a small roof. Heat no longer strikes directly into the root zone, water does not evaporate as quickly, and the soil underneath remains stable much longer. 2. Maintaining stable moisture. Many people see blossom end rot and immediately assume the plant lacks calcium. But in many cases, calcium is already present in the soil. The real problem is that the plant cannot absorb calcium consistently because the soil keeps swinging between being too dry and too wet. When soil stays dry for too long and then suddenly becomes heavily soaked, the root system experiences major stress fluctuations. Water and mineral movement through the plant becomes unstable, and when calcium is not transported consistently into developing fruits, blossom end rot becomes very likely. Mulch helps reduce these fluctuations. It keeps soil moisture lasting longer, slows down evaporation, and prevents the plant from constantly swinging between dry and wet conditions. 3. Feeding the soil biology. As straw, dry leaves, and old hay slowly decompose, they become food for fungi, bacteria, and earthworms. A truly healthy living soil system can maintain better structure, hold water more efficiently, and help minerals move more consistently around the root zone. So deep trench planting helps the tomato plant build a larger root system, and thick mulch helps that root system live inside a cooler, more evenly moist, and less stressful environment. And with tomatoes, it is exactly this kind of stability that allows the plant to continue flowering, feeding fruit, and producing for much longer throughout the summer season. Calcium, compost, and living soil. One very distinctive aspect of traditional Amish growing methods is that they do not constantly chase fertilizer numbers. They care far more about the foundation of the soil. Instead of asking, "What nutrient is the plant lacking so I can immediately add more?" they usually begin with a different question. Is this soil alive enough, stable enough, and capable of supporting roots long-term? That is why, in tomato gardens, you may see them using very basic materials such as finished compost, bone meal, crushed eggshells, or agricultural lime. These materials can help add calcium and improve the soil over time. But one thing needs to be said clearly. Eggshells are not a fast cure for blossom end rot. Many online discussions make people believe that simply sprinkling eggshells around the plant will stop blossom end rot immediately. In reality, it is not that simple. Eggshells break down very slowly. If your tomato plant is suffering from blossom end rot right now, the eggshells added today usually cannot solve the problem tomorrow. Some experienced tomato growers crush eggshells year-round and gradually mix them into the soil, or add a small amount of bone meal beneath the root zone during planting. Some even say the best tomato plants they ever grew came directly from old compost piles filled with coffee grounds, eggshells, fish scraps, and decomposed organic waste. This shows that tomatoes respond extremely well to organic-rich living soil. But eggshells, bone meal, or Epsom salt are not miracle cures. They only work effectively when combined with healthy roots, living soil, and stable moisture conditions. What matters more is that the plant has a strong root system, evenly moist soil, a root zone protected from excessive heat, and a continuous calcium supply available for steady absorption. That is why deep trench planting and thick mulch often create much greater results than simply adding eggshells. One approach builds the entire root system and stabilizes the soil environment. The other only adds a single slow-release ingredient. Choosing the right tomato variety from the very beginning. There is one extremely important thing many people overlook. If you want a tomato plant capable of producing huge harvests, you must begin with the right variety. Not every tomato variety is designed to produce continuously throughout the season. Many people accidentally choose determinate tomatoes, varieties that produce heavily during one main period and then slow down afterward. These are suitable for small containers, limited spaces, or gardeners who want one concentrated harvest. But if your goal is a plant that continues growing, continues flowering, and continues producing fruit until cold weather finally forces it to stop, then you need indeterminate tomatoes. This group is much better suited for deep trench planting, large root systems, and thick mulch systems. In the United States, you should also choose varieties based on your USDA zone. For zones 3 to 5, where growing seasons are shorter and cold weather arrives early, it is usually better to choose fast-maturing indeterminate varieties with shorter harvest times instead of giant, slow-ripening tomatoes. For zones 6 to 7, conditions are more balanced, allowing you to grow many popular varieties such as Brandywine, Cherokee Purple, Mortgage Lifter, San Marzano, or Beefsteak, as long as they receive enough sunlight and stable care. For zones 8 to 10, the hot season is longer, but pressure from heat, humidity, and leaf diseases is also much higher. That is why heat-tolerant and disease-resistant varieties become more important, especially when combined with thick mulch to keep the root zone cool. And in extremely hot regions, the problem is sometimes not the lack of growing season length, but that the plants experience heat stress too early. In those conditions, choosing a variety suited to the climate becomes even more important than choosing a famous variety. An expensive tomato variety planted in overheated soil, watered inconsistently, grown without mulch, and limited to shallow roots can still produce disappointing yields. Meanwhile, an ordinary variety matched properly to the climate, supported by deep roots, healthy living soil, and stable moisture, can often exceed expectations by a huge margin. Is 100 pounds actually normal? At this point, we need to be honest for a moment. Can a tomato plant come close to producing 100 pounds? Yes, it can. But that is not a normal result for every garden. That number usually appears only when many conditions become favorable at the same time. The tomato variety must be strong. The growing season must be long enough. Sunlight must be excellent. Disease and pest pressure must stay low. And the gardener must care for the plant consistently from the beginning all the way to the end of the season. 100 pounds represents the upper limit of a system that is functioning extremely well. For most backyard gardens, producing around 10 to 30 pounds per plant is already decent. And if you reach 40 to 60 pounds, you should feel proud because that is already a very impressive result. So do not let the number 100 pounds make you feel like you failed if you do not reach it. Perhaps the most interesting thing about the Amish is not simply their high yields. It is the fact that they have accumulated generations of practical gardening experience. Methods that are very simple, yet extremely effective when they truly understand the biology of the plant. They do not try to force plants using miracle tricks. Instead, they focus on more fundamental things: healthier soil, stronger roots, more stable moisture, and a lower stress environment for the plant. And perhaps that is exactly what many backyard gardeners today can learn from them. Hopefully, after this video, you will try applying a few small changes in your own garden. Plant deeper, use thicker mulch, keep the soil more stable, and start caring for the roots instead of only the top of the plant. Who knows? After just one summer, you may be surprised by the level of productivity your tomato plants are truly capable of reaching. And if you decide to try it, come back after a few months and share your results in the comments section. I genuinely want to know how your garden has changed.